The idea here is that this can be an informal conversation. I probably, in my edit, will have already started. And it's just I thought this would be easier than me blowing up your phone with questions for weeks and weeks. Just be like, John, why don't we just get on a podcast, get on a call, of course, but then, of course, record it for posterity because we haven't spoken in a while, huh?
No, we haven't. But it's funny that you say that because that is actually the reason why I got into blogging in the first place, because friends would ask me how I did something. And I'm like, I got tired of saying the same thing over and over again. Or back then, it probably wasn't text message. It was probably like a T9 message or something.
Just really labor intensive.
Yeah. And so I just started writing on a blog post about this is how you do that thing that we were talking about. And that's how I became John Biehler.
And maybe that's a good segue to my first question, which I always start my podcasts by asking my guest to tell the story of how we met. And sometimes it's hard to remember. So I'm counting on you here, John.
It's interesting because I thought about this a lot when you sent me the question, and I'm like, how did we meet? Because I think we have a couple intersecting interests, I think. One is, we didn't call it that at the time, but social media or blogging or communicating publicly in some way.
I'm probably going to ask a follow-up. Keep going, but yeah.
Yeah, but then I also remember very vividly us going on a lot of photo walks together as well. And so that photography angle was also one of my earliest passions. And how I got into blogging in the first place was because I was a photography blogger. I was blogging about photography, not photographs per se, but more about the tech and the equipment and that kind of thing. And I remember us going on those photo walks with the gang through Gastown and various places.
Yeah. And I would say, that those two things are probably like a Venn diagram that has a lot of crossover with the people we were hanging out with. Mm-hmm. Nikon sent us a camera at some point. I don't know if maybe that was how. Okay, yes, I think that's funny. The 3 guests I've had so far on this iteration of my podcast, it's all the same thing. It's back then, the only thing we really had in common was this social media thing we didn't have a name for yet. And we would just put ourselves in a room together. That was the other thing too, is that we met in person an awful lot back then for what was apparently online friends.
Yeah, and it's interesting to think how many real life friends started that way. For me, and especially with a lot of people coming to Vancouver at the time, that was a great way to meet new people and then stay connected with them afterwards.
Yeah, and maybe that is the silver lining of this whole social media mess, is that there were really great people that I met several decades ago through this silly interest of the read-write web, I guess you could say, the notion of being able to publish a thing. And those relationships have endured. It's pretty cool.
Yeah. It's interesting, too, how they've endured, because you and I haven't really spoken for a while, but I still know what you're up to thanks to those tools, to the extent that you publish, at least.
Yeah, exactly, which isn't super frequently. But I think it's funny that our relationship has more or less been one of, hey, John, I'm looking at buying this thing. And you're the go-to guy, right? Like even the TV stations would be calling you if they were on a technology story, you're the guy. And so that's just been our back and forth is, okay, I'm looking at this Raspberry Pi kit for my kid. And now it's 3D printing. And it's like, I've just burdened you with my tech questions.
It's my lot in life, I think, is to be the tech answerer for all my friends and family. And sometimes I get paid to do it.
And we value for that so much. And I think maybe I should lead with that. John, thank you for all the advice. But let's talk about what gets you excited. Like, obviously, I'm maybe not obvious to anybody watching this as yet, but it's my brand new obsession with 3D printing that had me follow up with you this time. So we'll talk about that. But that's like old news to you. So let's start with something a little more exciting. Tell me what's getting John Biehler excited about technology right now.
So I have 2 things that I'm stoked about simultaneously, and they overlap to a degree. One of them is something called Meshtastic. Have you heard of that?
I have not.
So Meshtastic is basically, think about the good old days of Twitter or text messaging. You're talking to a friend and you're going back and forth and life is good. But if your cell network goes down, or say you're at a very busy event or a music festival or something like that, you're not going to have cell service. You're not going to be able to stay in touch with your friends. So what Meshtastic is an open source, and it's an off-grid network of tools creating a mesh network for text communications, essentially. Some people think, well, so you're a prepper? I'm like, no, I'm not a prepper, but this is just something really interesting to me in the sense that floating around us all over the place are these free frequencies that we have access to. It's the same it uses the same frequency in North America, at least, that our old cordless phones used to use. So this is unregulated spectrum. And the really cool thing is there's a lot of really interesting devices that you can buy that give you access to this. And this doesn't require a subscription, doesn't require a cell plan, doesn't require anything. As long as you have two devices, they can talk to each other forever for the rest of their life. And it comes in all kinds of neat form factors, including 3D printed cases. And there's even little fun things like this that you can just put in your backpack, or literally it fits in your jeans pocket. And this has a GPS, it has a wireless radio, it has a battery, it's waterproof, it has a speaker. And this becomes something when I pair with my phone, the way that we can communicate. Again, completely free, off-grid. You can be backpacking in the mountains with no cell service, and you can have a base station in your car, and then you can then basically, if you give it internet access in your car, and you have cell service where your car is parked, you can get messages out to the real world if you needed to. So there's some really interesting nuances in there, but
that's really
one of the things
fascinating. I'm trying not to make the obvious joke about how retro the first couple devices you showed me looked with the physical keyboards. It looks like a Palm Pilot or a BlackBerry or an iSpring or a...
Yeah, this is called a TDEC Plus, and this is basically, it's not on right now, but this is basically a BlackBerry for all intents and purposes. And then this is probably my favorite one to carry because it's completely self-contained. It's super, just turn it on here. It's got a little scroll wheel, full keyboard, it even has little pop-up antennas if you need to increase your range. It's got Bluetooth, it's got Wi-Fi, it's got GPS, and it's super fun and lots of fun to play with. I was just at the planetarium for an event for work the other day, and I had one of these devices with me, and it has this notion of telling you when it's detected a new node. And I was literally inundated at the planetarium with over 200 new nodes. So all those towers that are going up around the planetarium, people have these things on their balconies, and they're basically relaying, creating their own sort of private network that I have access to in some way.
Huh. Those private network that you have access to, that feels like an oxymoron.
Yeah. So essentially,
it makes sense. Like, this is fascinating, and I'm trying to wrap my head around it. And the idea of mesh networks is not a new thing, like on the Wi-Fi band, at least.
Yeah.
So I'm trying to wrap my head around cordless phone technology that is both private and accessible.
The cool thing about this is I am on the public mesh, but on that mesh, all my communications are encrypted. So I have the notion of a direct message I can send to you. Everybody else in the mesh helps boost and transmit that message, but nobody else can read it.
Get it now. Okay.
Yeah. And it's not unlike an AirTag and how an AirTag works. Like, you don't have to own an AirTag to help the AirTag network if someone's trying to find their phone or their luggage or whatever. As long as you have an iPhone, the iPhone will anonymously and seamlessly and encrypted privately share that location of that AirTag. And it's similar in a lot of ways to that technology.
Okay. And you said there are two things that have you fascinated right now.
And it relates to the reason why we're talking. And one is it's 3D printing. But the thing that I'm really stoked about lately is this notion of a home lab. Have you heard of that term before, home lab?
Again, no, you stumped me.
Okay. So a home lab is essentially, we've both worked for big companies. They would have a network room full of computers and servers and stuff like that. A home lab is essentially a miniature version of that lives in your house. And you put a bunch of networking equipment in it. You put some smart home technology in it. And it's a little box essentially that you have in the corner of your house, in your basement, wherever it's convenient. And somebody recently designed a really slick thing called lab racks. That's with an X. And essentially, it's 3D printable modular parts to build your own rack. And essentially, then you buy some networking equipment, or you take what you already have in your house, like your router and your modem and that kind of stuff, and any smart home tech that you have, and you put it in this box. And it sort of puts it all in a nice little box, makes it very accessible, makes it modular and interchangeable. And all the parts are 100% 3D printed. So it's been super fun to build that out. But then also learning more about this side of things and how it's evolved. I never really got into super nerdy networking stuff because I didn't want to be a network architect, and I didn't want to learn all this other stuff because I was learning other things. But the tools now are so accessible and so easy. Like, it's literally like a one-click install, and boom, you have a Plex server installed on this old computer that I bought off Facebook Marketplace that's plugged into this rack. And now I have a media server that is serving up all my own personal videos and music and stuff like that. And I can share it with my friends.
John, are we having a conversation about how you're using Blackberries with cordless phone technology and putting servers back into your house as opposed to doing everything in the cloud?
No, exactly.
There's a theme here, though. It's almost like everything old is new again.
I'm taking control of my cloud and basically moving it into my house in a lot of ways. I still have a lot of cloud stuff, and that's not going to probably go away. But there's a lot of interest in me having more control over what I have, knowing that my personal stuff is not being sold to AI companies. It's not being harvested and resold to data brokers, that kind of thing. And again, I'm not trying to be super like tinfoil hat kind of thing. This is just something of interest to me, and I'm finding out every day it's getting more and more easy to do it yourself. And that was really a lot of the things that got me excited about 3D printing in the first place, is because I realized that you could do it yourself and you can make your own 3D printers.
But it wasn't easy, right?
It's not.
So let's go to the 3D printing thing. That's a great segue. Yeah. I messaged you like I do. Hey, I just saw this deal on a 3D printer. Am I crazy, or is this looks legit?
Yep.
And I bought it, and I'm excited, and it works, right? Like, I plugged it in, and
it just works, quote unquote.
It just works, and the metric that I'm using, the thing that I think is mind blowing, is that I printed the Benchy that everybody first print or whatever. And all of that happened, and it was materialized in my hand and everything else. And like, the entire cost of everything was still less than 1 day's skiing in Whistler. And now I'm printing things. But it occurs to me that, like, you've been printing things for what, like 15 years? And it surely, or longer?
Yeah, I started in about 2011.
Yeah, okay. So it can't have been that easy all the time. Like, surely, like I said in the question I sent you, it feels like you crawled so I could stand on the shoulders of giants, and there's a lot of evolution there. So help me understand the pain of what it was like back then, and how things are quite a bit different for somebody, an ape like me, to be doing it.
So for context, the printer we're talking about that you purchased is a Bamboo Labs A1 Mini, which is a very small, compact, but very capable printer. And it's a great introduction to 3D printing. A lot of times with 3D printing, people like, how big can you print? That's the question I get all the times. How big of a thing can you print a car? No, you can print a car in parts and assemble it. But
watching this little series on YouTube where they're doing exactly that. But
exactly, yeah. So this printer has a fairly small. Actually, it's a bigger build area than I thought. I thought it was actually smaller than it actually is, because I did look into it. But when I started, I got into 3D printing because I was at South by Southwest, the conference in Texas, and the guys at the time who were forming MakerBot were 3D printing very poorly shot glasses for people to try. And this was like complete bleeding edge. Like, nobody had seen this technology, because a lot of the times the 3D printing technology was locked away in big R&D departments and very hush and extremely expensive. Like, we're talking hundreds of thousands, if not millions of dollars for some of these older printers that were happening at the time, and everything was under extreme lockdown as far as patents and copyrights and that kind of stuff. When one of those key patents expired, MakerBot and a few other companies jumped on that bandwagon and they started creating machines. But when I bought my first printer, it was actually MakerBot's second iteration. The first iteration was just, it seemed unattainable to me at the time, because I think it was about, I don't know, $2,000, and you had to build it all together, put it all together yourself. You had to solder everything. And then one of the founders of MakerBot went on the Colbert Show, and he 3D scanned and printed Colbert's head. And I'm like, take my money. I don't care. This just seems way too cool for me to not be interested in it. And I got it. And I quickly realized what skills I was lacking in the assembly of said printer. And this is going to be quite the contrast to what your experience was assembling your printer, which is basically taking the foam off of it. But so I had to learn electronics. I had to learn how to solder. I had dabbled in soldering, but had never really done anything serious with it. And now I've got a $1,500 box in front of me that I'm trying to make work. And I was nervous that I was going to ruin it. And then I had to learn mechanical engineering, because 3D printers are essentially just mechanical machines and motors and things like that. So you have to understand how it all interoperates. And then I had to learn 3D design as well, because at the time there wasn't a lot of things for you to print. The Benchy didn't even exist at that time. And so having it, to me, it was like, it's a hobby I was paying to learn. I was learning through trial and error. I was following in the footsteps. At the same time, though, and I think this is really how things figured themselves out for me, was I started blogging about my experiences. And I was one of the first people to do that in a serious way. And I was like very detailed, and I had a lot of information for people that were coming right up behind me with the same equipment or similar equipment and that type of thing. And so I believe that my blog posts were instrumental in helping a lot of people get interested in the hobby and seeing my results and that type of thing.
Even if it took 15 years for those people to... But yeah, case in point.
Yeah. So I spent some time as a 3D printing consultant, and the thing I did most is explain to people that 3D printing is probably not the solution for them. And obviously that's not a good business model to have if you're telling your clients not to use this technology that you're the expert at, because it hasn't been. It's still, in some ways, it's still very niche, and it's still very specific to your needs. But thanks to things like the Bamboo Lab printer. And before the Bamboo Lab printer, there was another company, and then still is, Creality, which makes arguably one of the major developments in 3D printing was the price drop. As you would expect, things have a sort of a sweet spot when you're trying to get mass adoption of something. And Creality came out with basically a $200 printer, I don't know, probably 6 or 7 years ago now. But it was completely unlike your Bamboo experience. At the time, compared to my MakerBot experience, it was, wow, amazing, this just works, until it didn't. And the problem is that these machines, they're machines, they break down. You have to get your car serviced regularly for the same reason. If you're not remotely interested in maintaining your car, you would take it to a dealership or a repair shop. That doesn't exist for 3D printing for the most part. If you're not interested in maintaining your machine or learning how it works and maintaining it, you're stuck. And a lot of people had these printers, not just the Creality ones, but there was a whole bunch of different companies at the time. And those printers are just collecting dust in garages and closets and basements and stuff like that. And they're probably never going to see the light of day again, and probably just going to become garbage.
Too frustrating to use or broken. And
yeah. And a lot of people will like, oh, let's give this printer to a school. And well, school doesn't want it. They don't want to inherit your crap and figure out what you broke on it when you were assembling it that made it so it would never print.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of that kind of stuff too. And really, I lost interest in 3D printing for a while because I had done so much of it. And we'll talk about some of the things that I did in a bit. But one of the things that got me excited about 3D printing again is we got one of the bigger Bamboo Lab printers in the office. I guess now's a good time to introduce. I work at Triumph, Canada's Particle Accelerator Center, and we do a lot of outreach events. We're Canada's largest physics lab, and we try to get people, specifically students and young minds, interested in science and technology and STEM and STEAM and all that fun stuff. So we do a lot of outreach events, and we got a 3D printer in to create a 3D printable version of our cyclotron, which is a particle accelerator. And essentially, we have the world's largest one. We actually have the Guinness World Record for it. And it's about 18 meters in diameter, and it's about a couple stories tall. And it's essentially a giant magnet that takes protons and smashes them into a target and creates isotopes. And those isotopes are used for, I can't even keep track of all the different experiments and types of research that we do on them. But I guess the milestone one or the key one would be cancer research. So if you go to UBC Hospital and you get any kind of scan done that requires a radioactive injection so they can see the cancer cells and other things like that, there's a good chance that material came from my lab. And we actually send it from our lab to UBC Hospital under Westbrook Village via a little pneumatic tube, which is crazy and old school. But essentially, long story short, I wanted to create something that we could give to people to get them excited about it. Also, the thing that I learned early on with 3D printing is that it's a gateway drug to a lot of interesting STEAM activities, because you're using science, you're using mechanical engineering, you're using math, you're using art, you're using all these different things. And so I came up with this, which we call this a kit card. And this is just like those old school cards that you would, or models you would get when you were a kid, or we were kids,
yeah,
to assemble, and you want to build like a TIE fighter or a race car or whatever. And so this is our cyclotron. And so you can build it. And this model is actually on Maker World if anyone wants to download it, triumph.ca/kitcard. And essentially this gives people an idea of what we do and how we do it. And one of the things that we did is we bought these printers, and I was like, wow, this printer just changes the game as far as simplicity and how easy it was to set up. The one that we got at work was significantly bigger than the one that you purchased. But we also quickly realized that this would be really great to take on these outreach events. Like I mentioned, we did an event at the planetarium. And so we just bought the same printer you did, and we had it at a conference last month in Whistler. And I was the one sort of babysitting it for the event. And I just fell in love with it. I already have a big printer in my garage. Actually, I have a lot of printers in my garage, but this particular printer is just so small and cute, and it's cheap. Like it's $200 on sale basically, and it just works. And I got it because it's good to understand it and learn it, because I'm doing it for work, and we have one at work, and I have to take it with me to events at work. But also sometimes it's handy on my big printer. I'm printing big things all the time. Those prints can take days. I might want to print something small in the meantime, and I can just send it to the little printer and it's done immediately. So it's handy that way. But getting back to the breakthrough with, I think, in a lot of ways that Bamboo has accomplished with their stuff. And for those that don't know, Bamboo is an offshoot of engineers that came from DJI, the drone company, and who also arguably revolutionized drone technology in simplicity and being able to not have to be a crazy trained pilot.
Yeah. The track function on DJI, that's like cycling. Every cycling influencer has one.
Yeah, exactly. And so you can see it wasn't just the hardware, it was also the software and the whole ecosystem that they created. And you add in things like multi-materials and being able to print in multiple colors on the same print, that kind of thing. And then also the price point. The price point has just continued to drop and be affordable and accessible to people. I took that printer to 2 events, and I guarantee I sold dozens of them to people. I had no idea it was so cheap. I had no idea it was so small, so quiet, blah, blah, blah. Those types of things.
Yeah. But your experience with printing goes back, like I said, in my questions I sent, we used to go to Maker Faire, and it was when my kids were very young. I've got a picture of my oldest at 5 years old, maybe, and next to your 3D printing station at Maker Faire, printing all those years. And that was just like, to me, it looked like John with his hobby and sharing it with all comers. And we were fascinated. And you give us these little Minecraft keychains and things. And it was like extremely cool. But at the same time, you probably were also saying, you know what, though, like, probably not the kind of thing that you want to struggle through yet. It's a nice demo. It's cool. It's okay for people like me that are okay with soldering and the mechanical engineering side of things. And by way of queuing up my next question, and I guess to bridge the gap between those years and how easy things are now, I don't have to know 3D modeling. I don't have to know anything, John. I need my $20 a month ChatGPT subscription. Because the other day, I have an anecdote for you. The other day, I sat down, or I was so excited about the printer. So I told this might be a longer story, but bear with me. I sat down and I was so excited, and I was telling my partner about my 3D printer and how excited I was. It was like I bought it, and then it was like, oh, and by the way, I have a 3D printer now and I'm having fun. Is there anything that you want printed? I said. And she thought for a while, and then she comes back to me and she shows me this little water spout on the end of her watering can for her flowers. And wouldn't it be cool if she could get a hold of this part that used to be there that isn't anymore? And anyway, no such file exists, right? I'm all excited about 3D printing, and now I'm faced with a pretty steep learning curve where I've got to get the calipers out and 3D model this thing. So I download Blender, and I'm like watching YouTube tutorials, and I'm making an earnest attempt at trying to understand 3D modeling so I can make this thing, because wouldn't it be cool if I came through? I got stuck, as you do, and I went to ChatGPT and I was like, look, just make this simple for me. I'm using Blender. Give me the step-by-step instructions that I need to do to create a cylinder that looks like this, that has this bend and this taper. And so it did. It spat them all out, and I got to step 3 and I was already stuck. Like, where is that in the menu? And then I realized at the bottom of the instructions it said, would you like me to just output a Python script that you can run in Blender so that we can build that for you? Yes, please. Yeah. Copy, paste, run file. Now I see the thing in the 3D modeling software. To make this long story a little bit shorter, I think I went through 8 iterations and prompt changes and design changes and editing the code and several prints to get the fitment just right on this thing. I can imagine it, describe it. I don't even have to type it. I can just describe it with my voice. And within hours, the physical artifact can be in my hand, provided that it is made of plastic and smaller than 20 cubic centimeters. That just blows my mind.
I'm gonna drop a couple of ways to speed up that process, because you took the long way around. And
I could not believe. My partner's feedback was, did you get any work done today? And I was like, babe, this was a 20-minute investment of time. I cannot.
Yeah.
But anyway.
But you learned a lot. Learned a lot.
I learned that I don't have to learn more. And you're about to save me even more time.
So there's a bunch of tools that have AI built into them. STL Buddy will then take your prompts and create 3D models for you. It's like skips out the Python's coding and all that stuff in the middle there. The other thing you might want to check out, and this is how I get people interested, it was specifically designed for kids at first, but I use it almost daily for my stuff because it's just faster.
Tinkercad.
And I have all the Tinkercad, yeah. Tinkercad is great because you can import models and you can go in and stretch them and make them fit. So you can find a spout that's not the right size, and then you can adjust it so that it would fit. And you get a little ruler so you can see all the stuff on there, and then you can export it. I also use that a lot for laser cutting. I have a laser cutter and a Cricut machine, so I need SVGs. And you can design something, like you can bring a logo into those things. You can mess around with it, make it 3D, so you can take Jordan On Air logo, make it into 3D, and then you can print out a badge. Those kinds of things, all very easily in that tool. But also, it's interesting how the Bamboo slicing tool as well has a lot of these cool features built in as well. So there's no limit of ways of doing it, but yeah, I wouldn't start with Blender. Blender is a pretty advanced tool for a lot of people, but hey, everybody has a tool that they like in their toolbox or that are familiar with, or maybe know someone that uses it. And the nice thing is now there's a million different ways of doing the same task in 3D land. At least when I started, there was very few options, and they were typically very expensive CAD drawing tools that I couldn't afford or didn't run on my Mac or whatever. And I'm looking at
SolidWorks
and things like that. So now you can do it all in your browser or literally on your phone in some cases. So
it's amazing to me how easy things have gotten. And that's it. I probably won't use Blender again. I'll just load up Tinkercad, which incidentally I had not used yet. But I have a tab open with Tinkercad ready it's on my to-do list to try.
The nice thing is they have tutorials built in right alongside the tools that you're using. So if you get stuck, there's a video that'll show you how to do what you're trying to do. And they've made
Yeah.
things so much easier, and they just keep getting better and better all the time. So
That seems to be the
other
theme
thing,
with just about everything, is that there is a video. There is the notion, I guess, of you even asking ChatGPT for this stuff is like there's a massive bank of data of all of these problems having been solved before. So when I say I can just imagine it, as long as somebody else has imagined it.
I think where ChatGPT could come in handy, though, and one of the problems that I've always had with these things is I know I want to build a thing. I have no idea what specialized tools exist to make that job easier, right? If you're a mechanic, you don't, or you've been trained on what tools you need to take off a wheel and adjust a brake pad. There's special wrenches that look crazy, and they look like something like from an operating room table, but they're like, that's how you get this thing off, because there's no other way to do it. You can't just use a pair of pliers. Like, you have to use a special tool.
ChatGPT should have put me on to STL Buddy or whatever it was you just said.
Maybe. But
if I had asked the right question, it would have.
Yeah, but a lot of times it's just the syntax. I don't know what that thing is called. There's got to be something. You could just literally Google, is there a tool that I can just prompt to STL, right? Like that kind of thing. But just knowing the syntax and knowing what these things are called, if you've not been formally trained on it, it doesn't exist in your head, right? And that's always been the problem. What's interesting, though, like your spout problem, because I've printed spouts. I've done ones that you can just literally take. I'm just looking over my kitchen counter here. I don't have a 2-liter bottle. You can put a spout on the end of the 2-liter bottle, and it's a printable bottle cap basically. But there's a search engine for 3D models called Yeggi, YEGGI.com. You just type in anything in there and it'll scour all of the online tools that are catalogs like Maker World, Thingiverse, Printables, Cult 3D, all these different places, and it'll show you
mentioned
those things.
I've already done separate searches. Last night I was Christmas ornaments in Thingiverse and Maker World.
So one of your questions is a practical 3D print, and you just reminded me this is something that I printed for my door.
That is extremely practical.
Yeah,
I love it. I absolutely love it. Do you know what? Another funny anecdote, when I was talking to my partner about my new 3D printer and the things that I wanted to print and the things I was printing, and I talked about how I'd started this Gridfinity project where I have my storage in the one little drawer that I have on my 3D printing desk. And she said, before you print anything, I have a bunch of containers you can use. And I was like, I don't think you understand that the printing is the thing. I don't want your existing containers. I want to make a specific container that is this big.
That's for that thing that you're going to put in it.
For that thing that I'm going to put there.
Yeah.
And which is, you can buy a wreath from the store. You can hack a branch off a tree and wire it into a circle.
Yeah.
But the fact that you can 3D print your wreath for your door is the thing. And I think that kind of goes back to what you were saying about your other hobbies as well, where it's not just about having a server rack. It's about the fact that it's your server rack that was custom built and created by you that is at least 50% of the interest there. And maybe I'm projecting, but to me, and because I'm new to this and maybe a little naive, like just as green as you could get, but it feels to me like the printing is the thing. In most cases, it's less about the output and more about the action.
Yeah.
I guess.
The problem I have is
it's equal.
Yeah. The problem I have is I loved building the rack, and then I'm like, okay, I'm done now. Move on to something else.
Yeah.
The process or the chase was the fun part. And although I'm continuing to iterate on it, and one of the neat things is, as you probably already experienced, when you go down this rabbit hole, you realize that everybody else has the same ideas. Wouldn't it be cool if this server rack, the sides of it were those SCADAS panels from IKEA, so you can modularly plug in anything? And then, surprise, somebody designed it, and so my rack is now a SCADAS panel on both sides. And guess what I plug into custom designed and made SCADAS mounts onto that. So the sides of this thing is just covered in all my little radio toys and stuff like that. So again, it's the customization, it's the personalization. If I wanted to make it all in green, I could. I chose not to, surprisingly. I made it black, but normally everything I own is green. But
Everybody's,
something
yeah,
else.
John has cactus themed everything for
Yeah,
anybody who
so
doesn't.
so this is one of my other interests that I think we're going to talk about. This
Yeah.
is a
But before I
Euro.
forget, the Scatus, I went out to IKEA and bought two pegboard pieces, large pieces for I'll
Yep,
call my workshop. It's my laundry room for all my bike tools. And I'm 3D
yep.
printing custom bike tool hangers. That's my current project. And I fear the day that I run out of reasons to iterate on it. Like, then what am I going to do?
How long until IKEA just sells a wall that is just made of that rack, right?
Yeah,
So
yeah. And
your
for
entire
like, I could have printed individual little panels, and I am doing that now for behind my 3D printer, which is in the landing outside of my bedroom. I'm printing little Scatus panels for the
yeah,
very small 3D printing tools that I have. But for my bike tools, I needed real estate, so I got the big ones to save myself a ton of time there. But the Scatus theme for again, I'll try to get some B-roll into this edit, and I should have had visuals. Like right behind me is one of those cards, those hobby cards that you showed, where I peeled out the parts and put together a robot, like a
yeah.
3D.
They're super fun.
Yeah, but I just think it's funny that Scatus theme came up because there's lots of different ways you can hang things on a wall too. There's different patterns, but we both chose the Scatus. You were going to show me I think a video synth thing.
This is this is one of my other hobbies is Eurorack, which is modular synthesis and more specifically video synthesis. And so this is a 3D printed case that I made. It's 3D printed. All the green stuff is the plastic. And so I got into this ironically, and everything's all connected, Jordan, in case you didn't know. So one of the big 3D printing projects I did, or probably the biggest, and I don't know how I can top it, is I worked with Douglas Copeland on a 3D printed art project called the National Portrait. And how that all happened was I bought into a Kickstarter for a 3D scanner. And this was at the time when Doug had an exhibition at the Vancouver Art Gallery, and he did a giant bronze sculpture of his head out front. And he invited people to come and put their chewing gum onto his head. And one night I was super excited and felt super nerdy, and I went down to the art gallery with my 3D scanner, which attaches to an iPad, so it's super portable. And I 3D scanned Doug's head. And I posted this on Twitter at the time, and I tagged Doug and I asked him, "What do you think about 3D scanning of art?" It was like a rhetorical question, not expecting him to respond to me and say, "Do you want to come down to my studio? I think we need to talk." And I'm like, "Am I in trouble?" And no, I was not in trouble. He was very excited about the technology that I was doing, and that started what's now been almost a 10-year working relationship with him. So we did a bunch of sort of tests. He let me scan him properly. I scanned his actual head, and I brought a 3D printer at the time, and I printed him in front of himself, and his mind was just blown. And that became his next sort of medium for doing art. And then a few months later, I get a call saying, "Hey, can you come for lunch to his house?" And I'm like, "Sure." And he didn't tell me why. And he had bought the same 3D scanner, and he had been scanning all the people that come to Doug's house. And Douglas Copeland, if you don't know, is a very popular person and has lots of famous friends. And so he had this fruit bowl on his kitchen counter or kitchen table full of 3D printed heads that he had done himself. And these were all like very famous people. And I'm like, holy shit, what's going on here? And the CEO and owner of the Simons company, the clothing store, department store, if you want, he had been to Doug's house because they were working on an installation in the Simons store in West Vancouver. And he was like, "What's this dish of heads?" And that spiraled into this thing. It's like, we want to do a 3D printing project. We want to scan people and print them. And ultimately that led to a 2-year cross Canada trip with Doug, where we went to a bunch of locations around Canada. We scanned about, I think, 2,300 Canadians. We would go to a Simons store and we would have an event, and we would just say, "Okay, come on down. Or I would go on like Global or Breakfast Television or whatever the local station was saying, hey, tomorrow or today or whatever that was, come on by, we'll scan your head, you get to be in a piece of art, we'll give you a free t-shirt. We had an insane amount of turnout. I could not believe it, my wildest expectations of how many people would turn out. We had 8-hour lines of people coming to get their heads scanned by me and Doug. And so then after we had all these scans, we spent a year 3D printing them in my basement. I had 25 3D printers. I had a big print farm at the time, printing these heads, and we would scale them up to like giant to tiny. And every week I would go to Doug's house and we'd have a meeting, and we were like, okay, we got this batch of heads. What are we going to do to them this week? And we would digitally alter them in some way. So we spent a year printing them, and then we spent basically a summer painting and assembling them, ultimately to go into the Ottawa Art Gallery as part of the Canada 150 thing that was happening at the time. So we did this massive exhibition in Ottawa, and it was unbelievably well received and super cool. And there's now a part of it, or if you're in West Vancouver, if you go upstairs to the men's section, you go up the escalator, it's right there. And
In the Simon
unbeknownst
store.
to Doug, in the Simon store, yeah, they took a part of it. It's in a couple of different. They chopped up the art piece into 4 pieces, and it's in 4 pieces across Canada. And funnily enough, Doug didn't realize it at the time, but he actually included my head, because we had 3D scanned the team. There was a core team of us that were running these events and doing all the printing and stuff. And when we'd get to a store, we'd just have the printers in the store window, and we would just print someone's head randomly. Doug, me, some of the other team members, and so I literally still have a box in the garage of like my head, a box full of Doug's heads. All this, I don't want to throw them away, but I also don't want to, I don't know what to do with them. So if you want one, let me know. And so then in this piece that's in West Vancouver, my head is in there, and it probably shouldn't have been, but it is in there, and you can definitely recognize it. And there's also a few other people that we have mutual friends with that are in this as well, like Kathy Brown. She's in it, and she's very easy to spot in the display. So
Yeah, that project fascinated me too for all of those reasons. And that was a great recap of 2 years of going across the country. And I was thinking in my head, like 8-hour lineup of people waiting to be 3D scanned, and the 3D scanning probably didn't happen quick like that. Even
I got it down to about 30 seconds, but there's always people want to chat with Doug. They want to chat about the technology.
Yeah.
So
but
everybody
where my head went was, holy smokes, the amount of time to print. But then you explained, full year of a print farm doing its thing for all that time.
The fun thing was when we did these events, Doug would fly home afterwards, say we were in Toronto or wherever, and then I would stay at the store for a couple days with all the printers in literally the clothing section, like in the middle of the aisle, printing we did little heads for everybody. Everybody that came and got scanned, we gave them their head as a thank you. And so I would stick around and I would print them, and people would come by and see, you're in the women's clothing section at Simon's, and you turn the corner and then boom, there's this guy with a whole bunch of 3D printers making little heads. And they're like, what is going on? And I think Simon's was very happy with the response they got from the public for that event across Canada.
That is pretty cool. Forward thinking. For less surprising, I guess, that an artist and a 3D printing hobbyist would arrive at this, but for a department store executive to see the appeal, that it is still pretty mind-blowing to be able to watch an item materialize, albeit over the course of, depending on the size, an hour and a half to 5-6 hours with the machine I have.
Your little benchy is 20 minutes, and that is just enough time for people to be excited and then see it complete. I saw this at the events that we just did recently, where people were just like, is that a 3D printer? Because a lot of people still have never seen one in person. They don't have access to a school or some other place that would have it, or Maker Faire and that kind of stuff. And they've heard about it, but they don't know what it looks like. And the fact that it's just sitting on the table in front of them always is mind blowing to some people. And to see it moving, and then they're like, oh, it's like a hot glue gun that moves. I'm like, yes, it is.
Effectively, yeah. How long do you think before everybody has seen it and it's less of a... I mean, I was obviously very familiar for all this time, But that, I guess the idea of me being able to get my hands on one and for it to be easy enough for me to do is reasonably novel. But I have to assume that's going to, like, I'm at somewhere on a curve of hockey stick growth for 3D printing as a hobby or as
it's funny because back when you saw me at Maker Faire with your little ones, that's when I thought it was going to take off. The problem was at the time, the marketing didn't live up to the hype, or the reality didn't live up to the marketing hype, I should say. Everyone just assumed it was going to be like a photocopier that is in the shape of a microwave, right? You've seen it in Star Trek. Picard just asked for his Earl Grey tea hot, and it just materializes in this thing. And there's certainly aspects of that technology that do exist. It's just not either affordable or practical or food safe or all kinds of different problems with that. And so to answer your question, I thought it was going to happen 10 years ago because I was so excited about it and I thought this was going to be the next big thing. But the reality was, and this was echoed in my earlier statement about being a 3D printing consultant, because once I finished with Doug's project, I was like, okay, let's keep going. But I don't think I can top this art project I just worked on, but a lot of people need help, and I certainly did work on a lot of interesting things, but it's just one of those things people just can't wrap their head around. Like, how can I use this in my daily life? How can I use this in my business? How can I use this in my work? And there's a different answer for all those questions. And it just really depends on what you're trying to do. Sorry, it's my Meshtastic going off. Someone's communicating around me. But a lot of times people, it's the wrong tool for the job, essentially, is what I'm getting at. And there's much more efficient ways of doing some of these things. I don't print everything. There's certainly lots of things I could print, but sometimes it's just easier to go to Dollarama and get that part.
Yeah.
If I wanted in metal, that's a whole other conversation we could have. It is possible to 3D print. My Ultra Apple Watch, that's 3D printed titanium.
Huh.
It's all around you.
Did you buy the strap or did you have it printed?
No, the watch itself. The watch case is.
Oh, I see.
Yeah. They use recycled titanium and they 3D print it in a metal 3D printer.
And I have it in my questions here. This conversation has gone way more organically and natural, which is great. So I don't have to sit here reading my questions. But I was going to ask about, we live in a world where you can print 3D car parts, and even my partner, who's a bit of a Luddite when it comes to technology, is fascinated that they're printing teeth in their office for people, for crowns and such. And yeah, it's mind-blowing to me what's possible. I don't have any, aside from the hobbyist aspect of it and things like my tool wall, and I don't know what else. I don't have any like grand plans for the type of 3D printer I'm going to be, but I also have I was a child the last time I was this excited about a piece of technology. I don't think that's at all an exaggeration. Like, I've had computers and action cameras and gaming consoles, but I have to go all the way back to the Nintendo Entertainment System to get to the giddy feeling of just walking past it and being like, you're still there, aren't you, you cheeky little bugger? I love it.
Yep.
The just joy. It has paid for itself 10 times over in smiles. I say that about bike parts and things like that too. It's like miles per smiles, like metric that if it's raining, you go out and spend a ridiculous amount of money on a new rain jacket, and then you do that one extra ride, and it's But this is, just the giddy feeling of tinkering around with it and having some. I cannot, like, the feeling of victory when I actually printed the water spout and it fit onto the.
Yep.
It's just one of my biggest concerns, John, and maybe this is like a good final question to wrap up on. Is that feeling going to wear off?
No, I don't think so. I don't even know how many tens of thousands of hours of time I've spent 3D printing stuff. I still like to sit there and watch it. I still think it's a cool technology. One of the things, though, I think you're going to change, you're going to evolve, I think, is how I think you're going to approach 3D printing. And what sticks with me is what Brie Pettis, who is the founder of the original MakerBot, he said this very early on, is once you understand how 3D printing works, you look at the world differently. It's almost like you have like MakerBot goggles, is what he said at the time to pimp his company. But essentially, you realize how much of the things around you could be 3D printed, maybe already are. And I was just at this market in Maple Ridge on the weekend, and they have an aisle of just stuff. Like you need oven mitts and all that kind of stuff, right? It's a grocery store markety type thing, but they had a section of toys and stuff like that. They were all 3D printed toys. And these were not like farmer's market kind of 3D printed toy booth type things. These were properly packaged and shrink wrapped in for sale toys from Gans, the teddy bear company or whatever. I forget what the product they actually make is, but they have 3D printed dragons and all this other stuff. And I'm like, okay, so we've really hit the mainstream. It's also interesting now when you see on Amazon, sometimes when you buy a part, and I would imagine this is probably pretty prevalent in your world, in the bike tool world, there's probably a good chance that some of those pieces and parts are 3D printed. It just depends on how's it being used and stuff like that. And the crazy thing is I can see a part on Amazon, like I'll look up something and I'm like, oh, that's 3D printed. Why would I buy that? I can just print it. And someone is literally just printing them in their basement and selling them on Amazon directly, because not everybody has a 3D printer. And I totally get that. And I don't look down on people that don't have a 3D printer. Why would you if it's not in your wheelhouse or something of interest? But I don't have a lot of things that car guys have, and that's fine. But yeah, the bottom line is I think you're going to look at the world differently, and you're going to find lots of new reasons to keep your 3D printer busy.
Yeah, good. That's reassuring, because it would almost feel like there might be like a crash of sorts, where I'm using that term to describe like an addiction where that kind of a crash.
Yeah.
I don't want to come down off of this high and then have to keep chasing the dragon. I could just print another 3D printed dragon.
Yes, you could.
I had a moment this morning, actually. I've always thought I have a very expensive coffee grinder, and it has a little very fragile plastic lid on it. And I've been like, I handle it so carefully when I'm filling the beans, because I thought, how would I ever replace this stupid little plastic cover on this very like $800? And this morning I was like, it might not look as clear as plastic, but I could print that in 20 minutes. I could replace that with a food safe.
There's a very good chance that particular part has already been modeled and is available on MakerWorld or some other place.
And that's I think fascinating.
The first thing I always do is whenever I'm looking for something, I just type in the company name into these search engines that I mentioned earlier, or just MakerWorld or whatever. And more often than not, I'll find like 18 variations on that same theme. And this is actually better. It's not just a lid, it's also this thing as well. And they've added SCADA holes to it. So, it's even more useful. Those kinds of things.
Yeah.
It's
plus SCADA. Listen, we're already at an hour here, which is fantastic. And I was going to make the joke that maybe we should just set up the follow-up call for a year or two from now when we're having the same conversation about robotics. Is that what's next?
Sure.
Thanks for catching up with me, man.
No, it was good chatting with you.
Yeah, I'll stop our recording.